first I thought we'd start by heading over to DORA.dev. And just in case you haven't seen this, if you go under the resources tab at the bottom, we have this infographic that kind of gives a high level view of the report. So it talks about how we found that those top performing teams are really a balanced team focused on a few different areas and really balancing out the way they choose what and how they work. One of the key findings, and we'll definitely, I think, have some discussions around this at the beginning of next year, is that those teams that are performing well, they're really focused on the users. And that when you focus on the users, you're going to have 40% higher organizational performance. And I think the stat around job satisfaction, right, that you have 20% higher job satisfaction. So I look forward to, I want to say later this year, but really it'll be at the beginning of next year, digging in and hearing from everyone. But I think we'll even potentially talk about it a bit today when we talk about code reviews and that focusing on the users. We saw a bit in yesterday's discussion around this, that I think when we are, reviewing our code, that code is for our users. And so there's some best practices, I think, that come out of that. The top key findings were around AI, culture, documentation, flexible infrastructure with the cloud, and distributing your work fairly. And Nathan will probably, I don't know if you'll want to speak to this later or not, but I think when we start to look at code reviews and how we get better and do well at code reviews, that I think all of these 5 key findings lend to how we're able to do that and how we can be successful at that. So over the last couple months, a small team of us have been working to think about different ways, as everyone's been kind of playing around with AI. So we were playing around and seeing, what could we do with Gen AI with the research. And so we built out this little tool where you can ask this is using all of the research and all of the documentation, the capability documentation that's on DORA.dev. And so I thought, before I jump over to the findings from this year, I would ask it, try our code reviews and see what the research has to say. So if we look at all the years of the research, what DORA has to say is that code reviews are important because they can lead to code improvements, knowledge transfer, shared code ownership, team ownership, and transparency. And they can also help with higher levels of stability and availability, higher code quality, and helping teams with process improvement work to increase their software delivery performance. I feel that has been my lived experience. I'm not sure from all of you. I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we get to the Lean Coffee discussion. The other thing that I find helpful and fun to use this for is you can look down through here, it kind of shows all of the different places that whatever you're searching for has showed up in the research. But I find it fun to look back and see, so when we started in 2014, or maybe, is looking back all the way at the beginning of the research, what were we saying about code reviews? And I think it's no surprise when we get to this year's findings that teams with faster code reviews have 50% higher software delivery performance. We've seen all the way back in 2014 when we started asking teams how they were delivering software, what they were doing, that they were using these peer reviews as a part of that to improve their software delivery. So to see that here in 2023, still today, those teams that are using code reviews and having faster code reviews are seeing 50% higher software delivery performance. And so I think we can see that looking at our code review speed and kind of investigating that and asking questions as a team can be a great place to identify, is that our bottleneck? And if it is, it's a great place that we could improve and look for opportunities, but it's possible that we already have fast code reviews. And so getting better at our code reviews might not be the place we want to dig in, because ultimately then it's just going to get stopped along this journey and there'll be another bottleneck. that won't help it get to our users faster, but it can be a great place to get started. And so in this year's report, what we asked when we were looking at code review speed is for your primary application or service you work on, how long does it generally take to complete the code review process? And you see, you could say that it was more than 6 months, less than a day, or you could even, we do not do code reviews. We're options. Additionally to finding that those teams that have faster code reviews have 50% better software delivery performance, I thought this was incredibly impressive, that those teams that have better code review speed have a substantial decrease in their burnout. There's also, this increase in your job satisfaction and in your productivity, but I think it'd be interesting to see today as we discuss as a community, what leads to that? Why is it that the faster the code review, the less burnout we feel? And so as I was thinking about it and looking at several of the different research program or papers that have been published over the years about this, some of the things that I see that can maybe add to the burnout is how many teams are involved in your code review process and where are you located? So oftentimes, if the team that you're waiting on for a code review is in a different geographical location, the context switching that you might go through, you send it off for a review, it could take a day or 2 or 3 to get that back. And that could definitely start to add to your burnout and the feelings of frustration. I think there's also, when we're working with several other teams that maybe don't have the context that we do, that sometimes the communication and conflict that can arise, because Nathan and I look at the same piece of code, we probably don't always see the same thing. So depending on maybe the comments that I've written in it or how much context he's been given ahead of time, if we don't know each other well, or we're in drastically different time zones, it might be very challenging for us to have that be a very positive experience. But on the flip side of that, I think we've seen there are teams that have great collaboration. If they're working in a loosely coupled architecture where the team that they're on are, they really have a good understanding of the scope of the software that they're reviewing, that they have good collaboration and communication between one another, that in those situations, then code reviews turns into a great opportunity for mentorship, for knowledge sharing, and for really finding new ways and better ways to deliver the software and develop the software. I think there's a lot of research papers that we've listed at the end of the report, and I encourage you to take a look at them. And one of the things that comes out in that too is about, kind of who you are and how, like where you are in your career also impacts how your feelings are around code reviews. So if you're earlier in your career, code reviews you would feel potentially differently about them depending on your experience within your team and with your organization. And also if you identify as underrepresented, there's definitely a lot of research into how that impacts your experience, especially if you're using pair programming. So as we saw in last year's report, how the importance that the technical, all of the technical process and culture capabilities, they really build on one another to improve your software delivery. And so when we look at faster code reviews, we think, oh, of course, faster code reviews, we're going to, have faster software delivery. But I think it's these added benefits that we get, or the capabilities that we actually focus on to get better at code reviews, where if, in those code reviews, if we're making sure that when we identify opportunities to improve our code, that we're going and we're making those changes and we're improving our code maintainability. To have faster code reviews, having that loosely coupled architecture and working in small batches is going to lead to those things. And so ultimately, I think it's the combination of, getting better at these multiple capabilities that has led teams to having faster code reviews. So I felt I could not, kick off this discussion without including this, which I think I've seen probably 1 trillion times. But this ultimate idea that if I receive a review and it's huge, it's overwhelming, the cognitive load of that, I'm probably just gonna, looks good to me. But when it's smaller and more concise, it's a lot easier for me to understand what I'm looking at, and I'm probably going to have a lot more feedback available to share, or the energy and effort to give. So it's much better when we work in small batches. So with that, I am going to turn it over to all of you. Cannot wait to hear what your thoughts are, what you've experienced, and how we can all as a community get better at our code reviews.